What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the pod. We are in week 10, so officially past the halfway mark. Now, I wanted to start. I asked for it a few times, and I did get some responses from some of you. But I did want to start the pod with a new segment I was going to try called Commish's Corner, where I have you guys just send me in some questions, whether they're fantasy related or just random. I did get a little bit mixture of both, so I'm just going to take a couple minutes here and just go over some of the questions that I was asked. This first one comes from Sam, and he asked if I could start my franchise with any player in the league, who would I pick? Now, I thought pretty much all day about this. I narrowed it down to a couple choices. I came really close to picking Justin Jefferson because I think he's just one of the best guys in all of football, and in terms of his athleticism and his pass catching ability. I came really close to picking him, but when I thought about it, I thought, if you're starting a brand new franchise and you're starting anywhere, I feel like you have to start a quarterback. And if I'm picking a quarterback to start my franchise with, I'm taking Patrick Mahomes. I know that's probably going to surprise a lot of you. I didn't pick Josh Allen, who I just love, but Mahomes is just a different breed of fucking species. He can run the ball, he can pass the ball. I think he's the best quarterback in football. To answer Sam's question, if I had to start my franchise with any player in the league, I'm probably picking Mahomes just from, he's just such a dual threat. What he brings to the table, that's probably who I'm going to pick. We'll go ahead and move on we'll just get all the football ones out of the way first here. So yeah, answered Sam's. Matt Glassmeyer, he asked me if I could start, bench, and cut somebody from every team. Now his original question was start, bench, and trade, or I think it was cut, bench, trade. I'm assuming he meant like start, like fuck, marry, kill kind of thing. But I kind of interpreted it as start, bench, and cut. So I went through everybody's team, and I kind of just narrowed it down to like the big three to make it tougher, because it would be easy to say I'd cut, some random whatever, like a flex guy. So I kind of narrowed it down to the big three on everybody's team, or what I thought was the big three, and kind of went that way. So we'll start with Casey's team. I'm starting Stephon Diggs all day long. I'm going to bench Hurts, and I'm going to cut Nick Chubb. Now, his was probably the toughest because his team is absolutely stacked, but out of the three best players on his team that I thought, that's kind of what I'm doing. Like I said, start Diggs, bench Hurts, cut Chubb. Moving on to Emily. I'm starting Josh Allen all day long. I'm going to bench Fields just because how he's looked here recently, and he's finally playing like what, he was drafted as and what he's capable of. I'm keeping Fields on my team, but I'm benching him. And then I have to cut ETN if I have to make that tough choice. That's what I'm doing there. Moving on to Al, I am starting Tyreek Hill. I'm benching Eckler, and I'm cutting Josh Jacobs. Is another really tough one, but Tyreek Hill's on pace to break like the receiving record this year, and he's just insane. I want to keep Eckler on the team, but can't start him, unfortunately, and then we're getting rid of Jacobs. Moving on to Ben, this was a tough one, and that may kind of a hot take here, but I'm starting Kelsey. I'm benching Ramondre Stevenson, and I'm cutting Christian McCaffrey. I think Stevenson just brings a little bit more to his team. He's uncontested with touches, and McCaffrey, as great as he is, he's injury prone, and he's kind of surprisingly like splitting touches right now. So that's kind of my logic there. Going down to Abby, I have to start Mahomes. Answering Sam's question, I'm starting my franchise with him, so I have to start Mahomes. That's an easy one for me. I'm benching Dameon Pierce, and I have to cut Dalvin Cook. With Sam, I am starting Justin Jefferson. I thought that was an easy one for me. I'm going to bench Devontae Adams, and I'm going to cut Tua. That was another really tough one. I would love to have all three of those guys on my team, but if for the sake of playing this game, that's what I went with. Colin, starting Saquon, I'm benching Dak, and I'm cutting DeAndre Swift. Liv, you got to start Derrick Henry, obviously. I am benching CeeDee Lamb, and I'm cutting Justin Herbert. That was another toughie, but I think Lamb brings a little bit more to the table than Herbert does. Matt Morelli, despite him being hurt, I am starting Jamar Chase. When he's healthy, he's one of the best wide receivers in the league. I am benching A.J. Brown. Can't start him, but I'm keeping him, and I'm cutting Brady. It's time for that fucking grandpa to get out of here. As for Vic, another kind of a tough one, but I'm going to start Terry McLaurin. He's so good. He would be such a fucking good wide receiver if he didn't play on Washington. He's already fantastic, but God, his potential if he didn't play on that team would be so good. I'm benching Joe Burrow, and I am cutting Mark Andrews. And then finally, Matt Glassmeyer. This was a tough one, but I'm going to start DeAndre Hopkins. I'm benching Jonathan Taylor, and I am cutting Aaron Rodgers. So thank you, Matt, for that question. That was kind of a fun game. I didn't know if that's totally what you meant, but that's kind of, again, how I interpreted it. And then the last football-related question was Liv, and she asked who I thought was going to finish last. This one's tough because I want to say just me, and because I want to avoid the karma of picking somebody else, but that's kind of no fun. That's not what she's looking for. I'm really sorry to have to say this, but I think it's going to be Vic. His team doesn't look great. It may change now that I gave him Burrow and I took Kupp from him. I'll get into the whole thing with what happened to Cooper Kupp, but it could change. But Vic has lost 6 matchups in a row, and his team is just doesn't look great right now. And it's not a horrible team on paper, but they're just not performing. So, Liv, to answer your question, Vic, I'm really sorry, but as of right now anyway, that's my pick just based on kind of like the trending data. All right, moving on to the more interesting questions, or I guess just the different questions that don't involve football. And we're going to go ahead and start with Al because he's actually sent me a couple of them. So his first question is, how does a blind person know when they're done wiping? And I was trying to come up with like a funny answer for this one, but I was like, wouldn't that just be like anybody else? Because a sighted person, someone who can fully see, isn't looking down at the toilet paper to see if they're done wiping, right? You wipe a couple times, you assume you're good, and then you're done. It's exactly how a blind person would do it. So to answer that first question, I would say like anybody fucking else, pretty much. You wipe a couple times, then you're good. His second question is, why does Tom Brady look like Kevin Bacon now? And I laughed about that for a good while because it's totally true. Brady took like an 11-day absence during the preseason or after the first game. I don't know what it was. It was right at the beginning of the season or right before the season. And he came back and he looked fucking weird. He looked like a skeleton. There's a lot of speculation he had plastic surgery done. I believe it. He looks fucking weird. He looks exactly like Kevin Bacon now. He's a guy that just can't accept that he's 45 and that his team sucks and that he kicked Giselle to the curb for like a 4-6 record. So that's why he looks like Kevin Bacon. Next question. Why do so many people look like Zayn? I don't fucking know. I don't know, but they do. Like you could walk down the street once a day and see somebody that looks like Zayn. I don't know. Zayn was just kind of like a default character that was created. He's just like he just has one of those baseline faces that you see fucking everywhere for some reason. But I know those of us who are really close to Zayn will know that this is true, that like so many people look like Zayn. It's essentially anybody with a beard and dark hair would be Zayn, but yeah, they're just Zayn. He's just one of those guys. He has one of those faces that you can find in a crowd pretty much anywhere you go. Next question. He asked, what's the capital of North Dakota? I think it's Bismarck, if I'm not wrong, but I don't really know. That's a weird question. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that one. So I'm not sure why he asked that, but that's my guess is I don't know and I don't care because that's a barren shithole. His next question is, where is the clitoris? Now, my answer to that is going to be the same as what's the capital of North Dakota. I don't know. I think that's the capital of North Dakota. I think. Either that or it's like somewhere on the leg. I don't know. That's a good question. And then finally, after Hal's last question is, what's the over/under on the size of Casey's cock? And he put he has over 7.5 inches. I think that's a great line. I'm hammering the over. I think the over is probably like -130, but I'm taking the juice on that one. I only Casey can confirm, but if we're taking a shot, if the line's at 7.5, I'm hammering the over. That seems like an easy one to me. All right, and then we did get into a couple more questions here that were sent in by Case. He sent me like a list of like 50 of them. I just kind of, just for the sake of time, I just picked just a few. Who's the sexiest man and woman alive? The only correct answer to that are Shakira and Paul Rudd. I won't elaborate too much into that, but yeah, I'd let Shakira pretty much do anything to me without asking, and the same goes for Paul Rudd. He's beautiful and he's hilarious. Those are my two answers, and like I said, I think those are the only two correct answers. Apologies for the language here, but I'm reading verbatim the question that's asked to me. If animals could talk, which one would be the biggest cunt? This is a toughie, but I think it's the hyena. I think the hyena, it already has that smug, like, fucking lumbering gait about it, and it has that, like, little laugh about everything you do. If one of those things could talk, I think that animal's a complete fucking dick. It was in the movie The Lion King, all the hyenas are just pieces of shit. But yeah, I think that's probably my answer on that one. I think any cat is probably number two. I think every cat is just a piece of shit. It doesn't help that I'm allergic, but I think cats were just put here just to be dicks. And I have yet to be proven wrong about that. So, hyena number one, I'm going with cat number two. And I think now that I'm thinking about it, I think a parrot, I know parrots can already kind of talk, but if a parrot had full speech, I feel like that would just be a complete piece of shit. So, good question, Case. That's my answer. And then finally, why is the Denver dog soaking wet? None of you are going to have any. There's like almost none of you are going to have any idea what this means. But I'll just tell the quick story. I'll go quick, I promise. But the Denver dog is a type of hot dog that you can get at Rockies games. Now, it's just a hot dog with green chili and cheese on it. But when we went to a Rockies game over the summer, it was me, Dono, Sam, and Case, I believe. And yes, it was. And we got to the stadium. We're like, okay, we're hungry. Let's go see whatever. And the only concession stand that didn't have a fucking 2-mile long line was like the gourmet quote hot dogs, the specialty hot dogs. So Dono and I are sitting there in line, and we look at the menu, and there's like, okay, there's just a classic hot dog, I think. There's like a New York dog that has like sauerkraut and shit all over it. There's a Chicago dog, which Chicago dogs have like 15 things on top of it. And then there's the Denver dog, which, like I said, had green chili and cheese all over it. So Dono and I are sitting there like, oh, you know what? The Denver dog actually doesn't look too bad. And I shit you not, 3 seconds after that sentence came out of my mouth, you hear a guy in the back of who, I don't know, he's just behind us somewhere. He storms up behind us, and he goes, why is the Denver dog so fucking wet? And I'm like, what the fuck? I look back, and this guy's storming up to the top of the line, and and there's like a high school age girl working at the concession stand who looks like she wants to blow her brains out. Of course, that's any concession worker if you've been in that position. But she goes like, what? And the guy like full like palms his hot dog like a basketball and picks it up. And it's like dripping. And he goes, why is the Denver dog fucking soaking wet on the bottom? And she was like, well, sir, it's covered in green chili. And then he was like, I don't know, like 2 seconds after that, he was like, I want a plain hot dog with nothing on it right now. And the girl, like, instead of arguing with him, which I get, she just said, okay, here's your fucking plain hot dog. Get out of here, you dick. But it was just the pure comedic timing of, oh, hey, the Denver dog looks pretty good, to, why is the Denver dog fucking wet? So now the Denver dog being wet's kind of an inside joke. So, Case, to answer your question of why the Denver dog is soaking wet, it's because it's covered in fucking pound of green chili and cheese. And for some reason, like a 40-year-old bald guy couldn't fathom the idea of that. So I believe, let me see, just make sure I didn't skip any. North Dakota, clitoris, wiping. Yeah. Okay, so that's, thank you for those that participated. Like I said, I just wanted to try something new, make the pod a little bit more listenable, I guess. I don't know. Listenable at the start here. So now if you don't want to listen to any other part where I get into the football shit, totally understand. But that's what I'm going to do starting now. Before I get into the results from the weekend, I wanted just to share a couple standing stats, all that good stuff here. The current standings as we sit right now, number 1 is Case, number 2 is M, Al is 3, Ben is 4, Abby is 5, I am at 6, Sam is 7, Colin 8, Liv 9, Matt Morelli at 10, Vic at 11, and then Matt in 12th. And then I just wanted to share the points for and points against stats because I just think that's interesting. And if it ever comes down to like a tiebreaker thing, it's that kind of stuff that matters. In the points for category, the standings are as such. It's Al at 1, Case 2, Ben 3, M 4, Abby 5, Sam 6, Colin 7, I'm at 8, Vic 9, Matt G is in 10th, Liv is in 11, and then Matt Morelli is in last for points for. And then the points against is me. I'm the jizz sock of the league right now at number 1. Then it's Vic, Ben, Sam, then Al at 5, Liv, Matt G in 7, Abby 8, Matt M 9, and then M, Colin, and Case at 10, 11, and 12. So if you were curious, there you go. So Case, if you look at it, like M is 4th in points for and 10th in points against, which makes total sense because she's in 2nd. And then there's Case, who's 2nd in points for and last in points against. So totally makes sense that he is in 1st right now. Alrighty, so enough of that shite, and let's go ahead and get into the matchups. Fire up the bagpipes. Let's kick it off with our in memoriam for week 10. And we're going to go ahead and start it off with Vic, who lost to Sam 108.84 to 165. It was another just monster day for Sam 2 weeks in a row. He actually got the win this time. And just another lackluster one for Vic. And we'll actually go ahead and start on Vic's side. Marcus Mariota was decent. They lost to Carolina, but he finished with 21.74 fantasy points. He threw 2 touchdowns, threw an interception. That's about middle of the road for what Mariota's getting, so can't be too disappointed there. Jamal Williams played in a complete shootout win over Chicago and managed to get in the end zone, about 12 fantasy points. Chuba Hubbard is where he got in trouble. He returned back after injury and was supposed to split time with Deonta Foreman. He rushed for just 14 times. He was very much like second fiddle in that rushing offense. Finish was just 1.4. Terry McLaurin was fantastic last night on Monday Night Football. He had 8 catches and 128 yards, 22.8 fantasy points. He's been one of the more constant point producers in Vic's team. Rondale Moore was surprisingly good in that Arizona game. Arizona beat the Rams, rather. They beat them 27-17, 9 catches, 94 yards, 18.4 fantasy points. That's great for Rondale Moore. Gesicki, he had 2 catches for 31 yards, just 5.1 fantasy points. He just, unfortunately, was not looked at in that Miami offense. Vic used George Pickens, who I sent him in that trade that ended up being the worst fucking idea of my entire life. But it was good for Vic. He had 3 catches, 32 yards, and he also had a rushing touchdown, of all things, for 14.5 fantasy points. So good on the receiving end for Vic there. And that Buffalo defense, who were so good to start the season, They did get 2 picks, but they allowed 27 points, that they could control anyway for just 6 fantasy points. So it was just not a big week for Vic, and they had some guys just kind of let down for him. Sam had quite the opposite experience actually, who deserved to get the win this week, like he did last week. Unfortunately, couldn't get the win after putting up like 150 something fantasy points, but had plenty to do it this week. Starting with Tua, who's been one of the best quarterbacks of the year so far, and he's pretty much an MVP candidate actually. After getting his brains fucking mashed, 285 yards and 3 touchdowns for just under 30 fantasy points. That's a big day for him again, but that's what we're kind of used to seeing right now. James Conner, another pleasant surprise. He looked like shit when he came back from injury, but he got in 2 times for just under 70 yards and 23.6 fantasy points. So if that's actually what it's going to look like going forward, because the Cardinals cut Eno Benjamin now that Conner's back and healthy, so he shouldn't have any issues with splitting time anymore. I think things are going to get a little bit better for David Montgomery. It was another bad week for him, 37 yards and 5.4 fantasy points. Justin Fields is running the ball more than anybody in that offense. He looks like 2019 Lamar Jackson, who was just like a fucking freak of nature running the ball. But Khalil Herbert got put on the IR today, which is going to only boost Montgomery's usage. Even if it's not a ton, it's going to be better than it is now. So, bad week for Montgomery, but maybe getting better going forward. It was another huge week for both of Sam's wide receivers. Justin Jefferson's just a fucking stud. There's just no other way about it. 10 catches, 193 yards, and a touchdown. He mossed the Bills this week. He made probably the best catch easily the best catch of the season, if not one of the best catches ever that I've ever seen in that game against Buffalo. So 37.3 fantasy points for JJ. He's just so fucking good. It was a good game for Devontae Adams too. I was wrong on his output. I think I had him rated like a B. Like I did that new little rating system thing. He was an A player this week. I thought Indianapolis had been good against wide receivers, and they had no answer for him at all. He had 9 catches, 126 yards, and a touchdown for 30.6 fantasy points. So another get right big game for him. Sam got the better of the T.J. Hawkinson Zach Ertz deal call, and if you're listening, unfortunately, Zach Ertz has a season-ending knee injury, and Hawkinson just keeps factoring into that Minnesota offense. He had 7 catches for 45 yards and 11.5 fantasy points. Just a good day. He's not skipping a beat in that offense. I worried that there was too many mouths to feed in that offense, but he's not. He's getting his due. He's getting his due. So good game from him there. Deontay Johnson had a decent game. He finished with 10.3, 4 catches for 63 yards. And then it was just a 6-point day out of the New Orleans defense. It was a low scoring game, which is what you hope for against Pittsburgh. But Sam was so far ahead that it didn't matter. He could have gotten negative 20 out of the New Orleans D, and wouldn't have mattered whatsoever. So great week for Sam, but unfortunately we got to keep kicking dirt onto Vic's corpse after 6 straight losses, and I think the majority of those have landed him in the obituary section, which is just unfortunate. And then this is going to be a quick bagpipe session because only one other person got obitted. I don't think that's a word, but I keep using it, so we're gonna go with it. And that's Matt Morelli, who has lost 3 straight, and he actually put up the lowest amount of fantasy points for the whole season at 61.32. Was far from beating Liv's 122.34. So if we were playing by golf rules, Matt, that's kind of the equivalent of duffing your drive in front of the ladies' tees. So you may have to play next week with your pants around your ankles. Starting with Tom Brady. Brady looked pretty good in that game in Munich, actually. He had 258 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did throw a pick, and they ran this fucking absurd play where Leonard Fournette tried to throw a pass to Tom Brady, who fell down before the ball got to him, and then it was picked, and then he like chopped the guy in the legs as a trip and got a penalty. So it was just the worst designed play ever. But I mean, he still finished with 20 points, which for this year's Brady, that's probably like closer to his ceiling. So not too bad of a day there. I was dead fucking wrong about Philly and Miles Sanders, and we'll lump AJ Brown into this too because they combined for a total of like 6.5 fantasy points. Sanders had just 54 total yards, 5.4, and A.J. Brown had 1 catch for 7 yards. It was just a horrible day for the Birds. They looked terrible. Washington came in with a plan and executed it. They never let Philly really into the game. It's a weird day. I can't believe those two guys were held in check, but fuck, that's fantasy football for you. Moving on to Melvin Gordon. He got 11 points. That game sucked, as every Bronco game does, and he had just 24 yards, but he had a couple catches. That's why it got him to 11 points. And you know it's a bad day when Melvin Gordon is your second highest fantasy point producer. So, yeah, not great. Juju Smith-Schuster. Holy shit. He had 2 catches for 33 yards and then got absolutely fucking annihilated on a hit that probably like gave him to a brain. I encourage you to just go watch Juju Smith-Schuster get blown up on like this crossfield pass. It's kind of scary. He got like obviously knocked out on the play. He like went down like a sack of hammers. Not great if you're Matt and you have him and you're watching that, because I think he's going to be out for at least a week because he got just fucking blown up. So yeah, 5.3 for him. That happened really early in the game, and we never saw him again. I don't even know if he's alive anymore. Evan Ingram, yeah, just 3 catches for 14 yards. Jacksonville just kind of struggled against KC. He just got finished with 4.4. Gallup he's kind of just in that mid, like that 6, 7, 8 range in Dallas right now. He had 4 catches for 35 yards. It's a total shootout in that game. He's just not the guy in that offense. I'll get to it with Liv here in a second, but most of the work, the significant work especially, went to CeeDee Lamb and not to Gallup. So 7.5 for Gallup, and just 2 points in that Vegas defense. I thought that game would be worse than it was against Indianapolis, but that was a pretty fired up Indianapolis team with their new coach, Jeff Saturday, and I got that wrong. I thought Vegas could beat those guys at home, but I keep forgetting how fucking terrible Vegas is. And yeah, their defense did play no part in that at all to help the cause and finish with just 2.0. So it was a week to forget for Matt, who finished with, again, the league worst 61.32. In a PPR, that's just shocking. All right, moving on to Liv. Liv had a couple duds in her lineup, and we'll just get those out of the way. Derrick Henry, surprisingly, was one of them. I bet Derrick Henry to have a big day against the Broncos, and he absolutely didn't. They shut him the fuck down. He had just 53 yards, 8.7 fantasy points. I bet him to get 2 touchdowns in this game. I was dead wrong. I had him ranked as an A player, and he was like a D+ player this week. So another one that I got wrong, and unfortunately for Liv, it sucked, but didn't matter at all. George Kittle's another one too. It's a weird offense in San Francisco. They have so many mouths to feed. Kittle, Ayuk, Debo, now McCaffrey. It's a high-powered offense, and they have a lot of players they got to try to get the ball to. I liked Kittle better than he produced in this one. He had 1 catch for 21 yards and 3.1. And then it started getting a little bit better. Tennessee's defense, they were great against the Broncos. They had a pick and just allowed the 10 points. They were good and solid. Metcalf, he had 6 catches for 71 yards and 13.1 fantasy points. Singletary, he got in the end zone twice. It's weird. You think for a guy that scores 2 touchdowns, 15 points is low. They were both just like really short yardage bust-ins, but I mean, 2 touchdowns, you can't complain about that. He did cough up a fumble, but it's still not a bad day for Singletary, who was rated pretty low in that game against a good Minnesota rush defense, or they had historically been a good rush defense. Herbert he struggled. He's just, unfortunately for him, he just doesn't have anybody to throw the ball to right now. Like so many people on the Chargers are hurt. That whole offense is hurt, and it definitely, it's noticeable right now. And he finished with just 14 points, 196 yards and a touchdown. For what he has, that's not a bad outing, but he had a tough matchup in San Francisco. But where it really, really paid off for Liv was CeeDee Lamb. Holy shit, was he good in this game. He had 40 fantasy points, 11 catches, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He was a big reason that game went into OT. Dallas completely fucked that game up. They had Green Bay by the nuts and couldn't do it. But it was a huge day for CeeDee Lamb. So yeah, it was a tough week for Matt, but Liv got a much needed win as she tries to crawl out of the bottom there. 122.3 to 61.3. That's a waking nightmare if your name is Matt. All right, no more bagpipes. All right, so let's go ahead and get to the others here that were not at the bottom of the porta potty hole, and we'll go to Case and Al. We had an upset this week. Casey put as the was the what did I say? Was he the first highest scoring, second highest scoring? So. This was a complete high power matchup here between Al and Casey, who ended up beating him 130.72 to 118.6. It was on the lower end of the spectrum for Casey's scoring. Jalen Hurts last night salvaged his day with 3 total touchdowns, but he just didn't look great in this game, and the Philly offense didn't look great at all. That being said, he still finished with just under 26 fantasy points. You take that all day long, even if the guy doesn't win. Najee Harris it was 9.9, so just under 10 points. He had 99 yards. It was a pretty productive day for him. If he had gotten in the end zone, it would have been better, and you wouldn't bat an eye at it. But that Pittsburgh offense is just so bad, and Najee Harris has been underwhelming. He's just kind of failing to bust out. They're the worst in the league at yards per carry. Pittsburgh is so. Not a great year to own Najee Harris, but he's still getting around double-digit points every time, which is okay. Nick Chubb, a little bit of a downer game for him, and still 15 points. If that's his floor, that's really good. But it was a little bit of a down game for him. 63 yards and a touchdown, but he did lose a fumble. Kind of just an okay game for Chubb. Big game for Diggs, 12 catches for 128 yards. The only thing with him is he's not getting in the end zone very much this year. Buffalo is such a fucking weird team this year. They're so hot and cold. At least the one constant is that they're getting Diggs the ball all the time, which is great if you own him, PPR especially. It's great, but he's just not getting in the end zone enough. But I mean, still, you're not complaining about 27 fantasy points by any means, but. It could be better if they could just get him in the fucking end zone. Waddle, he's starting to play second fiddle to Tyreek Hill more and more as the season goes on. It was fairly even splits there for a while, but the last few games they're definitely favoring Tyreek Hill, and you can see it in Waddle's production. 4 catches, 66 yards. That's still good for 10.6, but it should and could be a lot better, for sure. Greg Dulcich played no factor in that Broncos game at all. He had 1 catch for 11 yards after he had been doing well. He had been getting double-digit points in the first 3 games that he played, and then it just completely died for him in this game. But he's a victim of just a horribly run offense. Michael Pittman is better. It was better. The Colts actually showed like they had life. It's because they brought Matt Ryan back. That was a no-brainer, I thought. And Pittman's going to, if they keep Matt Ryan at the helm, we're going to start seeing his value go up and up. He had 7 catches, 53 yards, and 12.3. I think it's going to be that and better going forward. Then a good solid 10 points out of the New York Giants defense. Pick, fumble recovery, and just 16 points allowed. That's pretty expected against a shitty-ass Houston team that sucks in the air. And then moving on to Al, who experienced a better day than Case did. Derek Carr, had to stream him because Lamar was on a bye, and it worked out. okay. I mean, he had 248 yards and two TDs. He had 23 fantasy points. He's just still just very underwhelming and not great. And he was blubbering like a fucking little girl after the game about how his team sucks and how it's like, you don't know how much we put on the line for our bodies. And I'm just, it's like, okay, well, I don't know what to tell you, man. Fucking your team sucks. But he got about 23 fantasy points, and for Al's purposes anyway, that's pretty good. I was dead wrong about Eckler. I really thought they just hammer him with the ball. They just really didn't get an opportunity to do so. That game kind of sucked. That San Fran and Chargers game. Eckler finished with 13, which isn't bad. That's his floor is always going to be double digit points, so that's not too bad. But kind of underwhelming there. Josh Jacobs had a good game. He had 78 yards and a touchdown. Caught a few passes as well. 22.6 fantasy points is good there. Tyreek Hill, it was a good game for Miami. They put up 39 points, but it wasn't really due to the big guys like Hill and Waddle. It was their random other guys that were scoring all the fucking points, but he salvaged his day with a touchdown, 15.4 fantasy points. That's not too bad. Again, that's his floor, which is totally fine. Godwin was good in Munich, 6 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown, 19.1. That's a great day for him. Tanyan keeps it's so weird. Green Bay, Tanyan's not been the play lately. I feel like he had 1 catch for 8 yards, 1.8 fantasy points in a game where Green Bay had to throw the ball the entire game. They threw to that Watson wide receiver more than anything. Tanyan just sat there and watched it all. Sutton was okay. He had 6 catches, 66 yards, 12.6. If Denver ever figures out how to throw the fucking ball and Wilson remembers how to play football, Sutton's value will go up. It's tough right now. And then San Fran finished with 10 points. Good and solid. They had a pick, allowed only 16 points. It was good expected day out of San Fran against a pretty depleted Chargers offense. So in the end, Al gets the win, 130.72 to Casey's 118.6, and Casey finally dropped one after just being like the fucking demolition guy of the league, and Al's making a play for one of those top spots. So we're starting to see some shake-up stuff here. We're gonna go ahead and move to Abby and Ben. Abby got the win, 132.5 to Ben's 111.9. Now, Geno Smith was good in Munich against Tampa Bay. He had 275 yards and 2 touchdowns for 23.2. That's pretty much right at his average. I think he was averaging like 22 and a half, so just a little bit better. It was a good day for Geno despite Seattle not scoring a whole lot, but it was a fine fantasy performance anyway from Geno Smith. McCaffrey definitely salvaged his day with a touchdown. He had 17.7 fantasy points. He had less carries than Elijah Mitchell, which I think surprised a lot of people, including me. I did bet McCaffrey to score a touchdown. I threw a little bit on 2 touchdowns in this one, so I thought he was going to be better than he was. I definitely never thought he was going to get out snapped. It was weird, but I guess that's just in that offense where there's so many good players. I think we might see that every now and again. It's strange. Who did not get out snapped was Tony Pollard, who took advantage of another game without Zeke. Zeke missed due to injury, and Pollard ran for 115 yards and a touchdown for just under 24 fantasy points. Pollard's proven to be the guy in that offense, and I think he's going to get the lean on the carries. I know the Cowboys have said that they're going to keep splitting carries with him and Zeke, and they're going to keep riding the hot hand, but the hot hand right now is Tony Pollard, and I think him going forward he's going to put up more and more points just like that. Ben got really unlucky with Jerry Jeudy, who he hurt his ankle like right at the start of the game, so he finished with 0 points. It sounds like he avoided something major, but yeah, for this week anyway, it just kind of sucked. He blew his ankle like just right at the beginning of the game, and he didn't play the rest of it at all. So kind of shitty luck there. Tyler Lockett, another touchdown for him. He's on fire this year. He was one of the few bright spots in that Seattle offense. 3 catches, 42 yards and a touchdown, 13.2. Pretty good day from Lockett. Kelsey was just true Travis Kelsey. He had 6 catches, 81 yards, and a touchdown for 20.1. He's just the biggest focal point in that offense, so that was easy there. DJ Moore failed to replicate the success he had against Atlanta 2 weeks ago. He had like 150 yards and a touchdown in the last time these guys played, and he was limited to just 4 catches on 30 yards for 6.9 fantasy points. It's kind of slowing down a little bit, but that's just a weird Carolina offense who runs the ball more than anything right now, and I'll get to that here in a little bit. And then, whereas the Dallas defense has been great lately, and I think they're the number 1 defense in the league right now in fantasy, they struggled against Green Bay, which surprised me a little bit. They had 2 fumble recoveries, which helped them get 5 fantasy points, but they allowed 31 points, and then they got the loss. They let Green Bay kind of throw all over them there, especially in the second half. It's a weird for them, but I'm sure they'll bounce back against a shittier opponent than Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. So yeah, it was just a downer. Not too bad of a week. The 0 from Judy didn't help at all, and he got some underwhelming ones with DJ Moore and the Dallas D. So just kind of unlucky there for Ben. Abby did plenty to win this week, starting with Patrick Mahomes, who blasted Jacksonville. 331 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did throw a pick. Didn't matter because he still got 41.14 fantasy points. Another huge day for Mahomes that we're just used to seeing all the fucking time. Dalvin Cook, another really good game from him. He didn't struggle with Buffalo whatsoever, and I didn't think he was going to. He finished with 28.6 fantasy points, 119 yards, and a touchdown. Abby, I hope you're just so thankful you didn't trade this guy. I hope you think about that a lot, because I do. I think I was like, what if this fucking guy was on Casey's team? Like, we'd be so dead. But I'm glad you kept him because he's a stud, and he had a huge week. Dameon Pierce just couldn't get anything going against the Giants. He had 94 yards and a fumble, which hurt his day a little bit. He still finished with 12.2, which is enough, which helped Abby enough anyway. But it was just it was a rare, like, kind of a shitty day for Dameon Pierce. I mean, they just bust him up the middle so much, and he played a decent rush defense. So kind of an okay day for Pierce. Mike Evans wasn't as good as Chris Godwin, but he was still okay. 5 catches for 54 yards. That's good enough for 10.4 fantasy points. You can't be too mad at that. Amari Cooper didn't play at home, so he was always going to suck. He had 3 catches for 32 yards, 6.2 fantasy points. Just know the next time he plays at home, he's going to finish with at least 15. I talked about it last week. If Amari Cooper's at home, he's an entirely different player than he is on the road. So don't ever expect him to be good on the road, but if he's at home, he's just a fucking stud. Freiermuth, he's just part of that bad Pittsburgh offense. He had 4 catches for 36 yards. He was a little less effective than he had been in the past, but New Orleans was tough to against wide receivers. So I was right to predict a kind of a icky day from him, and it was okay. 7.6 out of the tight end position I feel like is around the average of what a lot of people get. I was wrong about Josh Palmer. I really liked him this week, but he could only muster up 3 catches for 44 yards and 7.4. Yeah, just part of that struggling, depleted Chargers offense right now. And then it was good. The defense, the Carolina defense was better than I thought. I thought they were going to be okay, but they were better. They got 14, which is good. Just allowed the 15 points. They got a pick and they blocked a kick in that game. So at home, they had the weather on their side. It was pissing it down. It was cold. It was windy. As long as they could stop the run, which they did really well in that game. Actually, they were always gonna be favored. So, good week for Carolina, and ultimately it's a good week for Abby. All right, let's move on to Matt versus Colin. And Matt changed his name to No More Frank Third Reich. And if you don't get that, the Colts coach is Frank Reich, who was just like ruining the Colts offense and Jonathan Taylor. And you'll see why that impacted Matt with Frank Reich getting the boot. Before we get there, we'll start with Jimmy Garoppolo, who he wasn't great. He did not throw a touchdown in this game. He rushed for a touchdown and he threw for 240 yards, excuse me, for just under 16 fantasy points. A crazy stat that I saw after that game on it was the Sunday night game. Jimmy Garoppolo is 10-2 in games that he doesn't throw a touchdown, which is crazy. That's weird. I feel like that shouldn't happen, but it does. Cordero Patterson had been great since we're coming off the IR, but was horrible in this game. He couldn't do anything, and because he couldn't do anything, Atlanta started running the ball to like all 3 or 4 of their running backs that they had. So Patterson only ran for 18 total yards for 3 fantasy points. It was a rare shitty day for him. Let's see here. Kenneth Walker, he did okay. All his work was in the air. He finished with 13.2 fantasy points, but Seattle's path to success in that game, well, they didn't have a lot of success at all, but it wasn't on the ground. They did all their meaningful work in the air. And so Kenneth Walker just really couldn't find a way into this game. But he still finished with double digits, so it wasn't too bad of a week. Matt got a huge week though out of Christian Kirk against Kansas City, who have struggled against wide receivers this season. He had 9 catches for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns, so that was good for 33.5 fantasy points. Big week out of him. D Hop was better. He had 10 catches for 98 yards. Didn't find the end zone, but still finished with just under 20 fantasy points. So that's can't complain there. Kyle Pitts was another Kyle Pitts day. Just 4.8 fantasy points, 2 catches, 28 yards. They just refused to use him in that Atlanta offense. I don't really know what to say. I think after talking to Matt, I think Kyle Pitts is going to be bounced out of his team. And I can't blame him. He's tight end 20 on the season. He has only 3 games to where he's gotten double-digit fantasy points, and you can almost just guarantee that he's just not going to get the meaningful work. So it's a frustrating time to have Kyle Pitts. And then Jonathan Taylor. Finally, Jonathan Taylor had his breakout game, and he looked like vintage Jonathan Taylor. He had 147 yards and a touchdown in this game, and if I'm not mistaken, he did catch a few passes. Yeah, two catches for 16 yards. They finally used Jonathan Taylor how he was designed to be used. Just a fucking bulldozer. Get him the usage, get him the yards, and he's gonna do good things for you. And against an middle of the road rush defense too. He's scorched. He went scorched earth in this game. So that's if you're Matt, you can take that sigh of relief that you finally got what you were looking for out of Jonathan Taylor. Thus, his fantasy name, No More Frank Third Reich, who apparently had Jonathan Taylor on like a fucking leash. And that Colts defense was terrible. I mean, they won 25-20. They didn't force any turnovers. They allowed 20 points, 2 fantasy points, but in the end, it didn't matter for Matt's output. Now Colin was close to getting a result out of this, but he just had a couple duds. Chris Olave wasn't as good as I thought he was going to be. He had 3 catches for 40 yards. Andy Dalton is so fucking bad, and I ranted about this last week too, and it was the same thing this week. He looked terrible. It's about to be the Jameis Winston show, I think, as soon as he's healthy, which I think is going to be as early as next week. I think Olave is definitely going to benefit from that, but he had a good matchup this week against a horrible Pittsburgh defense, and could just manage the 3 catches for 7 fantasy points. So that was definitely a letdown. Lazard, same thing too. He just wasn't. He just didn't play a part in that game against Dallas. He's still dealing with a little bit of an injury, which I think played a part of it. But he had 3 catches for 45 yards, and he played second fiddle to that fucking guy that nobody's ever heard of before, that Watson wide receiver. So kind of a bummer there. Zach Ertz, he blew his knee in that game, a season-ending knee injury. I'm assuming it's an ACL or something. Sucks if you're Colin, because he traded TJ Hawkinson for Zach Ertz. So he's kind of in my situation where you just trade for a guy that is pretty much done for the year, and you're left kind of pounding your pud. So that sucks there. He finished the game with just 1 catch and 2.2 fantasy points. Younghoe Koo got just the one. He kicked one field goal, but he missed two extra points. He missed two straight extra points, actually, after he was leading the league in consecutive extra points made, which was like 48 or something, and then he missed two in a row. So that's this year's football for you. But it wasn't all bad for Colin. He got 12 points out of the Arizona defense. They were good and solid against the Rams. He got a touchdown and 10 points out of Leonard Fournette. He got 24 points out of St. Brown, 10 catches, 120 yards. That's the St. Brown that we've been used to seeing. He was much better in that game. And Trevor Lawrence was good. He finished just under 25 fantasy points. He had 260 yards and two touchdowns against the Chiefs. Good and solid there. And then Barkley, Saquon was great, as was expected against Houston. He had 152 yards and a touchdown for 25 points. That was one of the few things it seems like I got right this week. So overall, it was those letdowns for Colin. Colin could have easily won this matchup. If Olave had gotten the work, if Zach Ertz hadn't gotten hurt, he would have played a much bigger role. And Lazard, in a game where Green Bay puts up 31 points, and Lazard only gets 3 catches, that's pretty disappointing. But it's a good win if you're Matt, and he's still at the bottom at 12th, but that win's going to help him, and Colin's kind of trending in the wrong direction. And then, if I am not mistaken, I think the last one is just me and M, and I somehow got the win over M this week. It's probably one of the bigger upsets because my team sucks and M's a fucking powerhouse. But yeah, I kind of texted M throughout the weekend during our matchups, and she was like, she had kept saying that, like, yeah, her team was shit, and it's kind of hard to argue. Her team wasn't great. Justin Fields was who really kept her in this game up until last night. Fields finished with 167 yards passing, 4 total touchdowns. He had 147 rushing yards with 2 rushing touchdowns for 51.38 points. He literally made up just under about half of her fucking output. Justin Fields is just playing on another fucking planet right now. He's looking like I said, he's looking like 2019 Lamar Jackson, or he's looking like fucking Michael Vick. It's crazy. If it wasn't for Fields, I would have won this comfortably. M probably would have found herself in the obituary column, but she made a great call playing Fields over Josh Allen this week, and it kept it close. Unfortunately, she couldn't get the win, but God, Fields looks good right now. ETN didn't have any success against Kansas City. He had 45 yards and just 10.3 fantasy points. Just still okay. Double digits out of your running back is, not too bad. Kareem Hunt, I rated him as a D player this week. He finished with 2.9. He just doesn't play any role in that offense like any of the time, especially when Cleveland got blown out in this game. That he was always going to get phased out. Bad day for Kareem Hunt. Tough to own him right now. But Mixon was on a bye, so I get it. Thielen kind of watched as Justin Jefferson did everything in this game, but he still finished with 5 catches for 49 yards, 9.9 fantasy points. Kind of to be expected, and when your fellow wide receiver is like one of the best wide receivers in football. Marvin Jones Jr. didn't do anything for Jacksonville. 1 catch, 33 yards, 4.3 fantasy points. Goddard was scaring the shit out of me because it came down to last night. I had Philly's defense, who was playing very subpar, letting Washington do whatever. And M had Dallas Goedert. So it got to a point where I was down. I was only up by like 1 or 2 fantasy points in this game. And it's because Goddard caught a touchdown. Now, what I don't understand, though, is that he fumbled in this game. He fumbled. He got hurt. I think he's fine now, but he fumbled and got hurt. And the fantasy app just didn't give him the fumble. They just didn't record his fumble, if it had come down to it, and because I think you get -2 in this league for if your player fumbles, and if it come down to it and I lost by like 1 or less than 1, and they didn't record the fucking fumble, I was going to go to Connecticut or wherever the fuck I think it's in Bristol where ESPN is, and burn that place to the fucking ground if that had mattered. But luckily it didn't. Luckily the Philly defense did enough for me, and Goddard kept under 10 points. He still got 9.3 with the touchdown, but I was literally gonna go fucking Karen on somebody if I had lost because of that. Terrence Marshall Jr. Was kind of the up and coming wide receiver in this Carolina team, but he didn't get to do anything in this game. Like I said, they were playing in shitty conditions. He had one catch for 43 yards, which that was pretty early in the game, so I thought, oh shit, here it comes. But that was the only thing he did, and Carolina just they adopted the run in this entire game after that. So he finished with just 5.3. And then the Atlanta defense, it was a tough game for them. They couldn't stop the run. They gave up 25 points, didn't force any turnovers. Yeah, just the one for them. So it was overall, other than Justin Fields, it wasn't a great week for M, who had only one other guy get into double digits, and it was 10. And then the next highest was 50 fucking 2 points. As for me, it wasn't a great week for me either. Honestly, Kamara, it sucked in that game. 26 total yards or 26 yards, 7.5 fantasy points. Deebo Samuel last night, just 2 catches for 24 yards, and he had like 1 or 2 rushes, 7.1 fantasy points. It sucked. My kicker got 4. Fucking Cooper Kupp. You'll know why you'll see that I changed my name to Cooper Cucked. And I put it in the group chat, but for those of you that don't know, and Vic, I just pretty much gave you a golden egg. Cooper Kupp, he blew his ankle in this game. I was wondering, I didn't know that at first because I was watching Red Zone, so I didn't really see it. But I was wondering why throughout the whole game he had 2.9 fantasy points. He had 3 catches for -1 yards. And I thought, what the fuck? Like, what is happening? Turns out, he got hit coming down on his catch, and his ankle exploded. He has to have surgery. They thought it was like a severe high ankle sprain. He has to have ligament surgery, and there's like a 90% chance he's done for the fucking season because the Rams suck. They're probably not going to be in any sort of playoff territory because that team is fucking terrible now without their best player, and so they're just going to shut him down for the season. So I traded away Joe Burrow, fucking Ezekiel Elliott, and George Pickens for a guy that just had his worst fantasy day since 2019, and now he's out for the fucking season. So fuck me to tears. That's now the situation that I'm in. I know nobody else gives a shit, and everybody's probably fucking cheering because they're probably sick of seeing me near the top of the standings and winning fucking championships. It's going to be tough now that I just traded away 3/4 of my team for one guy that is now going to be fucking sitting in a hospital bed for the rest of the year. Sorry, I had to get that out of my system. Dalton Schultz, luckily I traded for him with Abby, and he had 6 catches, 54 yards, and a touchdown, 17 points. He's definitely one of Dak's favorite targets. Colin wasn't wrong when he was arguing that. At the time, he was Abby's worst tight end statistically, but now that he's healthy, I'm hoping that he's going to be decent going forward. That's a good start. And Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think I'm going to have to now start relying on him going forward now that fucking Cooper Kupp died. He's not been bad at all. He's gotten double-digit fantasy points in 6 out of the 6 out of the 10 weeks. He's a deep threat, so it's kind of boom or bust, but Cleveland's getting the ball in his hands, so, it's for about just under 15 fantasy points. I'll take that all day. I need all the help I can get now. I left a lot of points on my bench, but I somehow got the win against M, who was like 7-2 or whatever she was. So not taking that for granted. I threatened to egg Emily's house if she beat me. I tried to get Matt to steal her phone while she was like taking a poop or something and to bench Dallas Goedert. I didn't get a whole lot of takers on that one. Fair enough. But did end up winning 109-103. Low scoring, but hey, fuck, they don't ask how much, they ask how many. Oh, man. I think that is it. You guys are probably so sick of listening to me talk, but after everything, even after doing the new segment, I think I've kept this to like an hour, so I'm learning. I really think going forward, I think I'm going to do the pod on Tuesday because I can really keep it shorter than I do with the preview. But if anybody has any objectives, if anyone has any objections, rather, to that, please let me know. I want this to be as enjoyable of a listen and same with the email as a read as possible. So just let me know what you guys prefer going forward. I really think I'm gonna do the Tuesday pod. I can get through it a little bit quicker. That way, I can add in the segments. I can add in the Commish's corner. Get some more questions hopefully next week, and just keep going from there. So anyway, I don't think I missed anybody. If you sent me a question and I just missed it, I'm sorry. But I think I covered my bases on everyone who sent me a question. I think there's just like 3 of you. Totally get it. But going forward, if I could get some more questions, like I said, it can be fantasy related, not fantasy related, or like one of each. I'll have the time to answer just pretty much whatever the fuck you want. So I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you so much for listening. If you've gotten to this point, thanks for sticking through it. I'll pump this out, and I will be back with you guys on Thursday. Peace.